How to you all? I'm Marielis Acevedo Irizarry. I'm a political editor in El Diario, and I'm also the person in charge of the daily coverage of Puerto Rican issues in the newspaper. Thank you for listening and for watching this new interview. This time, I have on the other side of the screen Councilwoman Julie Won. She represents District 26, which covers neighborhoods like Long Island City, Sunnyside, Astoria, and Woodside. For those who doesn't know, that's in Queens, okay? District 26. One is one of the candidates running for District 7 in New York for Congress. After Representative Nydia Velázquez announced her retirement, she's facing right now the Bureau President of Brooklyn, Antonio Reynoso, and also the Assemblywoman Claire Valdez. We already interviewed both of them, and today is the turn of one. Thank you very much for being here with us and for accepting this interview and for being available to answer the important questions for the people of the district.
Hola, me llamo Julia Won, soy inmigrante, mamá y concejal. Desde que fui elegida, logré internet gratis para residentes de vivienda pública en toda la ciudad de Nueva York. Aprobé 18,000 nuevas viviendas, incluyendo viviendas muy asequibles. También aseguro 5 millones para crear la primera cooperativa de acceso al idioma y un banco de intérpretes para ofrecer traducciones en persona. Como inmigrante, aprendí inglés en las escuelas públicas y pasé por el proceso de naturalización. Sé lo que es estar separada de mis familias, abuelos y primos. No podía visitarlos porque no podía salir de Estados Unidos hasta obtener la residencia permanente. Ahora estoy estudiando español como mi tercer idioma. Quiero seguir aprendiendo para comunicarme mejor con mis constituyentes que hablan español. Mientras tanto, tienen mi compromiso total. En mi oficina siempre he tenido dos miembros del equipo que hablan español y en mi oficina en el Congreso seguirán teniendo personal que habla español. So I'm learning Spanish right now, but know that as an immigrant, that I will continue to make sure that language access is at the forefront, that I currently have 2 staff members as well as interns who speak Spanish, and will continue to make sure that there are Spanish speakers in my office because I understand what it's like to be an immigrant. I understand what it's like to learn English as a second language. And right now, my housing lawyer that I provide for free for housing services as well as immigration services are both Spanish speakers and of Latino descent because I understand how important it is to have solidarity with the community. So thank you for having me.
Muy bien, ahora yo voy a preguntar en español porque yo empecé en inglés y usted empezó en español. Así que la pregunta que le voy a hacer es, ¿quiere la entrevista en español o en inglés? En inglés, ¿no?
Inglés.
En inglés.
Por favor.
Al inglés también. Bueno, vamos a ver. Ya escucharon, está practicando el español y es un gran esfuerzo el que acaba de hacer, ¿verdad? La concejal. Al explicarle, ¿verdad?, al público pues lo que es parte de su plataforma. De eso vamos ahora a abundar. Juan, tell me about your reasons to run for the position of District 7 seat and what has helped you to make that decision.
Like I said in the beginning, for me, it's really deeply personal in my experience of knowing what it's like when I couldn't leave the country even when my grandmother passed because I didn't have my citizenship. So my family couldn't go to her funeral because once you leave, you may not be able to enter until we got our permanent residence and got our citizenship. It took me over 10 years. One of the bills I spearheaded in the council was doubling the fines of legal fraud services for immigration, because what we see over and over again are fake abogados who pretend to be lawyers, who charge us thousands of dollars to say, I'm going to help you get your citizenship, I'm going to help you get your green card, but then they take thousands of dollars from us on Facebook Messenger and then they disappear. I've also opened up the highest amount of migrant shelters in my district because when the immigration buses started coming in from Texas and some of my colleagues were fighting over which district should take more migrant shelters, I raised my hand and I said, I'm an immigrant. I will take as many as possible. So we ended up taking in over 38 migrant shelters where we had at any given time over 15,000 people who were undocumented, but we took all of them, we got all the children registered for schools, and then I opened up language access co-ops to make sure that there's translation, but also I started the first domestic workers co-op to make sure that women who wanted to do nanny work, childcare work, as well as house cleaning, that they had a legal pathway to paying taxes, working legally, despite the federal issues that we have, and with giving them a pathway to citizenship with an entrepreneurship visa and giving them financial independence. We also increased funding for the day laborers co-op, so that way the men who wanted to do construction work, that they had a pathway to work legally and pay taxes as well with a pathway to citizenship. So for me, my primary focus is going to be comprehensive immigration reform and ending family separation. I had John Ortega, who was 26 years old in Long Island City, who committed suicide after he came here from Venezuela because he was just so distraught of what it was like to come here by foot all over the Darien Gap and to get to New York, his dream country, and to be left destitute. So now he leaves behind his widow and 3 kids who still live in my neighborhood. I think about people like him who give me the courage to continue to fight for immigration reform and to end family separation. I had a 6-year-old boy in my district who was taken and deported, but when he was detained, he was separated from his father. And it just broke my heart because I'm a mom of 2 kids. And to think that a 6-year-old would be all alone in detention, it's incredibly heartbreaking. So these are the things that I'm going to continue to fight for, and also to help our small businesses. Our economy is everything. If people don't have food on the table and people can't make ends meet to pay their rent, nothing else matters.
I want to ask you, the Asian community has grown over the years in the city in many neighborhoods, including the ones that you want to represent in District 7, right? But right now, the Asian population is the city's fastest growing racial group right now, but at the same time the Hispanic population continue to grow. My question is, what characteristics, challenges, needs share both communities, and how are you planning to represent all of them?
Right now, my council district is not majority Asian. You know, I believe that there's a lot more that we have in common as immigrants, because this district, though, we are plurality in immigrants. We're over 60% foreign born. We share similarities of learning what it's like to learn the English language. I came here not speaking any English, and I learned it in public schools, at my public library. And we also share the commonality of what it's like to be paid under the table, of knowing what it's like for us to survive, to find a job, even if the government says you cannot work until you get citizenship status or you get permanent residentship status. But then we're told you have to work, and then they take away our temporary status. So I believe that there's more in common as immigrants, whether you're Latino, you're African, West African, like we're seeing a high influx of West African migrants in this city right now, or you're Asian American. No matter what, despite the color of our skin or the shape of our eyes, is that as immigrants, we have the same experience coming to this country, and we have more solidarity of banding together to say, we stand together to say no. My district has had rapid response trainings in every single neighborhood, which I've co-facilitated, and we've already trained over 2,000 US citizens who said, I'm going to stand by all of my neighbors, whether they're Latino, Asian, Black, no matter white, no matter who you are, we're going to protect you and we're going to stand by you. So that's what I'll continue to do in building coalition and solidarity and making sure that there's language access so that those who speak Spanish, those who speak Portuguese, that those who speak Senegalese, like no matter what language you speak, we're going to make sure that you have access to the government for ease of use and for support.
Okay, one, you have 2 contenders in this race. Reynoso, for example, has been praised by some people because of his experience, because he has been in government for more than 10 years. And on the other side, Claire Valdez, the assemblywoman, has been promoted as the candidate of the working class, of the working people. What is your best asset that make you the best option in this race?
Look, I think you have a lot of great options. People deserve to have choices as a democracy. I'm currently the only immigrant in the race, as well as the only mom. I'm a mom of 2 children, and that's not to say that anybody is less. I think it's also amazing that people are dads, and it's also amazing if you have worked in the fast food industry and the service industry, but so have I. I've worked at restaurants my whole entire college career because I had to financially support myself. And for me, it's not so much so like who is more working class. All of us are working class. None of us come from wealth, to my knowledge. I don't come from wealth. I also have a working class background. My mom worked at nail salons my whole life. My dad worked odd jobs at delis and wineries and warehouses. For me, I understand what it's like to have SNAP benefits. I grew up on public school free lunch. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to go to school. I went to school on making sure that we had public benefits for everybody, and that's why for me internet access was so important, because if our education is online, if our government services are online, we have to make sure that our lowest income neighbors are online. So my track record is I'm kind of like Goldilocks, right? Claire has been in office for 1 year, Antonio's been in government for 20 years, and I've been here for about 4 years, but also have a deep public sector experience volunteering. I was also the commissioner for the Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser when I worked in private sector. So I have 10 years of technology experience, and now I have 4 years of government experience under my belt. And I think all of those skills are transferable, and those will be used to make sure that we have efficiency in government, transparency in government, accessibility in government, and that's what I'll continue to do.
What do you think that a huge part of the analysis of this race is based on the support of Majors Vandani to Claire Valdez aspiration, and on the other side, the disapproval, if we can call it that way, of Reynoso and Nydia Velázquez to that endorsement?
I think it's great that they have those endorsements. I also have been endorsed by 4 Congress members, a senator, a state senator, and an assembly member, and a council member. So all those endorsements are important because those validators show the electorate that you are a trustworthy person, that you're reliable, that you do your job. But what's more important are the voters. And that's why we're here with you, to speak to voters who are going to cast their ballot and say, you know what, I believe this person represents me the most, and we have 3 great choices, but there's no ranked choice voting, so I'm going to pick this one.
Do you think Valdez has more probabilities to win in the race because of the mayor's endorsement, for example, or not?
You know, I think time will tell, because as you know, with every endorsement important, at the end of the day, it's not transfer of one-to-one vote. And you'll see that with donations as well. And you'll see that with support on the ground. So I don't think anyone can definitively say just because someone has somebody's endorsement that it's a shoo-in, because you see all the time across the city and city's history, incumbents can endorse somebody, sitting mayors can endorse somebody. It does not guarantee that they win.
And the fact that Nydia Velázquez is endorsing Reynoso, she has been in the government for more than 30 years. She's a very respected congresswoman. She's the one who's leaving the seat. Do you think Reynoso could have more probabilities to win because of her support?
I think we will see. I have nothing but respect for Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez. I've spoken to her twice about my potential run and letting her know that I wanted to do it. And I've also sat down with Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso respectfully to let him know that I was thinking about doing it. So, you know, I'm going to continue to run a positive race. And I'm not here to say somebody can't win or will win because of something. I'm here to win as well. And I'm going to be organizing on the ground and working with a broad coalition of folks in the community to make sure that we also have a very strong chance of winning.
You are a progressive Democrat as well as Reynoso. Valdez is a socialist Democrat. Up to what point do you think that this race is between different factions of the Democratic Party instead of the candidates? Because every time people mention this race, they start talking about the divisions. What is your analysis of that?
This is a very progressive district. You can't be elected in this part of New York City without being a progressive. So if you look at our voting records, and even if you ask folks for future voting records, it's going to be forecasted to be about the same. So I believe that we all share similar values and that we will continue to fight for the same things, like immigration reform and making sure that we end all wars and that we are fighting for affordability for all of our families so that you can put food on the table, pay for rent, and have good benefits from the government, like universal childcare, universal healthcare. At the end of the day, it will just come down to voters understanding your personal relationships with them. You know, having deep ties in your relationships matter because even if they see that we are aligned on values, it comes down to people that you've grown up with, people who you've served with, people who have seen you in action. And those are the people who are going to continue to be loyal and fight for you to be there, as well as new relationships that will come to form as we see throughout the city. So it's still early on. We're still only in the month of March. And I think people will pay more attention to this race as we get closer to Election Day.
Okay. You have mentioned healthcare for all, affordable housing, affordable childcare. Those are issues that are a central part of your agenda and for the other contenders as well. But my question is, what actions have you taken so far that have prepared you to continue those battles in Congress if you reach your goal?
Yes. So first and foremost, it was Big Apple Connect. That's the free internet program that we first got within 6 months of me being elected to have free internet and cable TV at Queensbridge houses, Ravenswood houses, and Woodside houses. Queensbridge is the largest public housing in New York City and in the country. Secondly, within three years, we were able to expand that program citywide, and now we have free internet and cable TV for all public housing neighbors in New York City. Second, I opened up the highest amount of migrant shelters, enrolled them in our schools. District 30, my school district, had the highest amount of funding for our schools because we made sure that during a budget crisis, when schools were losing funding, we enrolled more students to make sure that our schools were amply funded and that there were extra services, especially for English second language learners, as well as mental health services to make sure that those kids were getting an education. Third, like I said about the workers' cooperatives and registering them for ITIN numbers, individual tax ID numbers, so that the parents can work, we created the first domestic workers co-op for house cleaners and nannies so that they have a legal pathway to paying taxes and having socioeconomic independence and a pathway to citizenship. Next, we also made sure that there was a 1-to-1 ratio. So for housing, if we have at any given time 10,000 people in a migrant shelter, that means that I have to make sure that for each term that I am building up to that amount to make sure that I am building housing supply, especially deeply affordable housing supply for those people to be able to move into. And of course, the system doesn't move that way, but within my tenure of 4 years, I've approved over 18,000 units of new housing, which is more than the borough of Queens has done. And my project, 1LIC, which passed, is the largest in New York City history.
I want you to elaborate on that in a little bit, but I want to ask you about childcare because the mayor and the governor have taken steps in that direction. But there is a sense, there is a feeling that this is an issue that will cost not only a lot of money, but also a lot of time to come through. So how are you planning to speed up the discussion in Washington if you finally get to Congress?
We have to make sure that we unfreeze the early childhood education funding that is currently frozen under Donald Trump. We also have completely dissolved the Department of Education under Donald Trump, which is a huge problem. We have to make sure that we reinstate the Department of Education for public education, as well as making sure that there are diversity and inclusion efforts to make sure that low-income New Yorkers, as well as children across the country like me, who wouldn't be able to afford higher education otherwise, have a straight pathway. Right now, we have lost financial funding, so FAFSA for scholarships as well as low interest rate loans from the federal government for students who want to go to college or want to get a higher degree. We used to be able to have access to about $50,000 at low interest loans for students so that they can pay a little bit under half of what would cost you to go to college of $125,000 or for a graduate degree. We have to make sure that we reinstate these programs because it is untenable for any low-income family or working class family to take on a loan, a private loan of $120,000 year to year with 12 to 15% interest. That is life crushing. That will just end up in children who are going to choose to not go to school because it is just unaffordable. So that's what I would do. And in my district, I've included, or I've put in new school seats for 3K and pre-K, over 140 3K seats and over 65 pre-K seats, to make sure that there's a match of children who are on wait lists as well as children who are getting the school seats by examining or doing an analysis of the gap to glut in every single school district that is surrounding mine. Because my district has an overabundance of children being born every single year, yet we continue to have shortages in school seats. So in aging districts like my neighbors, we were able to move the school seats from our neighboring district with aging seniors, since those school seats were empty, and we were able to move them over to my district to inject these new school seats.
About the affordable housing or affordability in general, Mandani was with the president recently in the White House. They were discussing affordable apartments for Sunnyside, which is a neighborhood that you represent, but you didn't support that effort specifically. Why don't you support that effort, and what needs to be done or fixed in order to you to support that type of project?
To be clear, it's not that I don't support the project. My predecessor, so it was Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, State Senator Michael Gianaris, and my predecessor, Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer, who rejected that project. So it was before my time. What I don't support is the way that there was no community conversation. Marielis, you know very well, every member of the community should be part of our democracy, and if there's a big zoning change, and Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez has been a champion of this, where the community has to be at the center and forefront of these discussions, to be included in these decisions. They cannot just be a decision between Donald Trump and Zohra Mamdani. It has to be Donald Trump, Zohra Mamdani, and the community, especially those who are immigrants, like Spanish-speaking community members who are not at the table, and other language speakers who are not at the table, who are low income, to make sure that they get a say of what they want to see. Because $21 billion in investment is an amazing, great thing. I think that would be great if we can get it. But we need to make sure that there are approval processes in place and levers to be pulled, that the community gets to have a participation in this process when the decision is made. Right now, no decision has been made, and nobody has asked me to approve or deny anything. But I'm saying it's not okay for you to make these decisions without us.
Are you planning to have a meeting with the mayor regarding this issue, or what?
The city council speaker, as well as the land use chair and myself, have requested a briefing for the Sunnyside Yards project so that we can have a clear understanding of what this means and what the implications are and how legally this change will be made.
Okay. Up to what point you think that this issue could be solved in association, in coordination with the federal authorities, or in Congress specifically, more than in the state level?
Yeah, so Sunnyside Yards can be approved in two processes. The first one is with the state, if they choose to go through a GPP, a general project plan, with the Empire State Development. The second way that you can do it is through a ULURP, a uniform land use process, land use reform process with the city council. And whichever way they choose, it's fine, but it's more complicated than that, which is why this project is projected to take 100 years. 100 years. It's a very long time. As of the last feasibility study, and that's because it's also Amtrak and the Long Island Railroad, and the MTA, which means all levels of government will be involved in making sure that over an active rail yard of 180 acres, a massive amount of land that is active, in order to build over it, it's not an easy feat. So we will have to work together. The first and foremost is, at the end of the day, Congress holds the purse. If the President of the United States of America wants to give my district $21 billion, then we will have to go through Congress to approve that funding. I hope he should not be making that decision unilaterally either, and then it'll go through appropriations.
Okay. Let's move to Puerto Rico, because that's a very important topic for us as well. As you know, the Puerto Ricans are a big part of the Hispanic population in New York and in counties like Brooklyn and the Bronx.
Yes.
I want to know, what has been your contact with members of the Puerto Rican community to attend the issues that affect them at this point that we are talking? If you can elaborate on that, please?
As you know, many of us every single year, we pay to go to Puerto Rico for Somos conference. and both Somos conference in Puerto Rico, as well in San Juan, as well as making sure that we're going to Puerto Rico Somos conference in Albany. And that's where we have legislative meetings and discussions about things that are important to Puerto Rico. I've also met with the local legislature in Puerto Rico my first year in 2021 to really understand how they should decide on their desired status. So the Puerto Rico Self-Determination Act is something that I will continue to support to allow for a fair and equitable process, and that not me, but the Puerto Ricans themselves, that they should be at the front of the conversation and process, just like Sunnyside Yards. And their opinion is what's best to make this decision about their status for the Puerto Rican people. So I will always be supportive for the Puerto Rican people to speak on behalf of Puerto Rico and for them to make that decision. And I will continue to support in legislation of that.
So will you introduce that type of legislation if you get to Congress?
If I'm asked to, 100%. But I do believe that with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's actually Puerto Rican, and other Puerto Ricans in the government, I believe that it's more appropriate for them to do it. But if they want me to do it, 100%. But I never want anybody to feel like this other woman who is not Puerto Rican is trying to take my bills and become a champion of my issues when she herself doesn't have that lived experience. But if I'm asked to, I will 100% do it, and I will always sign on, and I will always vote in support.
Why you support that type of legislation and not one for a plebiscite, and not the legislation, or not a legislation for a plebiscite?
So it's not that I'm saying one or the other. It's saying that the Puerto Rican people should decide for themselves, and I will support depending on what they tell me is more important for them than I will do. Because as a non-Puerto Rican, I don't think it's my place to determine their agency, but I'm always here to listen. The same way that I do my land use processes, when my community members be impacted the most, when they tell me, Julie, this is what I want, then I will listen. We'll have a data-driven process, both qualitative and quantitative, where we'll have the evidence to say, yes, by and large, the Puerto Rican people have told us this, and this is what we will support.
For some people, the status issue is the main problem of the island, right? It is the root of the other problems. But at the same time, you listen to some congresswoman and congressmen, and it seems that they are not clear about what that means.
I mean, I can't speak on behalf of other members of Congress.
Because we have been under this situation for more than 100 years.
Right.
And sometimes you ask Congress people, and they don't even know that we are a commonwealth. So that's why I ask.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're so uniquely placed as New York legislators, is that you physically take us, you invite us to Puerto Rico, and I get to physically be there and to see in my own eyes. Because I first went to Puerto Rico even before I was elected. I went with my church to do hurricane cleanup after Hurricane Ida. And that's when I was physically removing debris and hearing from the people of Puerto Rico and physically seeing the energy and infrastructure crisis of the electric grid being so fragile, causing frequent power outages and not having enough investments. And to see that the hurricanes, the earthquakes, when it hits, there's such slow reconstruction efforts, and we see that it only makes it more and more impoverished, and we have to do something about it. The same way we would bail out other cities, like when we had a big fire in California. Why don't we see that same scale of bailout from the federal government for Puerto Rico? Is it because it's a commonwealth? Most likely. And I still remember when I was in high school, I remember when we started talking about birth control in my health class, that most of the birth control medications and pharmaceuticals were testing and being created in Puerto Rico and tested on the women of Puerto Rico. And it's very, very predatory and exploitative. So I will continue to empathize, and I will continue to go, and I will visit every single year. I will continue to listen to the people of Puerto Rico, the lawmakers who are elected in Puerto Rico, to tell me what they want to see and what they want to do, and you will have an ally in me to be supportive of that.
What could be done from Congress to speed up the reconstruction bottleneck, basically?
Well, we're going to have
the main issue,
Right, we need to have funding, and we need to make sure that, we're still recovering in Puerto Rico of that massive $70 billion public debt with a stagnant economy that has been seen as a decade-long recession. And as poverty rates continue to be double the poorest U.S. state,
Mhm.
median income is only 1/3 of the US average. Those are pretty abysmal numbers. So I think, there's no magic bullet that fixes everything at once, but first and foremost, we need to bail out the economy of Puerto Rico the way, especially after natural disasters, the way that we saw in California. When California wildfires happened, the president had no qualms and no hesitation in making sure that there was public funding in the millions of dollars being spent to rebuild. So we have to have that level of dedication to the island of Puerto Rico. And I think we also have to think about the education levels, because that's what I hear the most when I'm in Puerto Rico from the people of Puerto Rico, that we need to have better funding for public education and making sure that our schools are adequate, and even for the universities of Puerto Rico. I remember my first year, there was a big university strike when I was there, in making sure that our schools are well funded and that there's economic mobility for all of our families.
Some people think or call for the abolition of the fiscal board, which is the federal body that make most of the decisions regarding the fiscal issues in Puerto Rico. Do you agree with that, with the abolition of the fiscal board, or not?
It really, again, it comes back to the people of Puerto Rico themselves. If the majority of the Puerto Ricans, because it's not enough for some people of Puerto Rico to call for that, if the majority of Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico, as well as the Puerto Rican diaspora in our country at large, say that we should get rid of it, then I will be in support of it. But unless we have an alternative solution of how we're going to replace it and how it will function, it will be extremely difficult.
And without solving the status issue, how far you think Puerto Rico could advance in the claim for equality under programs like Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, which is being discussed right now in Congress, SNAP specifically. What do you think about that?
Well, I think SNAP and all of our public benefits are at risk for the whole entire country. And it will only make it even worse for all of our low-income neighbors, as we talked about earlier. So if we have about 3 million residents who are US citizens who can't vote for the president in Puerto Rico, that I believe personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of Puerto Ricans, but in my perspective, I think that just goes back to, taxation without representation. If we are continuing to benefit the country, but these folks are not allowed to vote, I think that's a huge issue. And I think that within the non-binding referendums that majority support the statehood in the statehood of Puerto Rico, I think that is a significant divide in independence and sovereignty. So I know that it's not easy for the Puerto Rican people, but because for me, the way I see it, I'm from South Korea. Right now, South Korea is in a 75-year ceasefire. That means that my country is kind of still like in a war, like we are in a war with North Korea being under communist regime in close connection with China, and then South Korea, where I'm from, in a state of limbo with close ties to the US. And we constantly have this conversation where there's just a divide in my country as well, where people say, I want to end the war and we should be one country with North Korea. Even within the Korean people ourselves, we can't decide what we want, and we continue to have this fighting. And the last thing we want is someone to come from another country and say, you know what, it doesn't matter what the Korean people think, we're just gonna make this decision for you legally, and this is what you're gonna have to deal with. So we don't want that in Korea, we don't want that in Puerto Rico. But we have to educate, and we have to engage, and we have to make sure that people have a say in making sure that Puerto Rican diaspora, as well as the people of Puerto Rico, are having the right facilitators and the right conversations and the right ways to make these decisions, and that there are lawmakers who are paying close attention to say, I will have your back and I will support you no matter what. And that's what I hope to do.
Bueno, ahí escucharon ustedes a Julie Won, ella empezó en español, entonces ahora yo voy a terminar en español sobre su propuesta, ¿verdad? Como candidata por el Distrito 7 al Congreso. Estamos hablando de la posición que ocupa en estos momentos Nydia Velázquez, de origen boricua, por eso también hemos abordado los temas de Puerto Rico, porque Nydia Velázquez pues, ha sido voz cantante en ese asunto y para nosotros pues, es importante saber qué tienen que decir los candidatos. Así que gracias. Juan, I don't know if you want to say something else before we left the meeting.
Mucho gusto, muchas gracias. La próxima vez estudiaré más español.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias por el tiempo. Que tenga muy buen día. Gracias por responder todas mis preguntas.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Chao.